So, g'day folks. Been wandering around Brisbane today. Just sort of quickly go back to this issue about the solar observatory. So I put a post up there about the Maxland Solar Observatory and how it's been used as ground zero to witness the eclipse. And I explain all the things that are happening in terms of a connection to Rocket Lab and Wallops Island or Wallops launch site and their military reconnaissance and the mission patches there, which are signs of electronic war and propagation. And I explain how the ARTEMIS rockets from NASA are going to be fired into the eclipse to basically find out how the eclipse affect the ionosphere. This actually goes back to a really interesting case back in 1990, May 29, when they had all of the circumstances came right, and they had an event which according to the New York Times, was when people looked up in the sky and saw the eclipse in, they were looking, quote unquote, into a parallel universe. And it's probably that's a bit more metaphorical and exaggerated, but I'm just saying, quoting the New York Times. But what it did to prove was the Einstein theory of relativity and how time and space is actually bent around each other. The place where it's actually Madsen has got a very interesting history. It was originally settled or largely developed by Khazarian Jewish immigrants who were basically fleeing immigration. They used their connections in shipping and finance to basically sort of develop a sort of little place of hub where they could sort of prosper without being persecuted. And with that became basically a great study of study again of solar systems and the seismic activity. So it's been a study of these things since 1873. It's got some really interesting heraldry. The heraldry of the mermaid on one hand holds the twin, the devil with the twin horn, and on the other level holds basically a book. So one indicates learning, high intellect, elation, and the other one is a more base area. And of course, aside from the solar activity, Maxland's also got silver and gold mines, and it's even got a place called known as the Devil's Gates Tunnel. And again, this is sort of juxtaposing everything. Even the mermaid, half man or half male, half fish. And again, that goes into a lot of the mission statements on the Wallop, which includes the Pegasus, which is the Pegasus constellation, the Yellow Hornet, which is I believe is a reference to basically US military electronic warfare units, and again connects this whole issue about the studying of the propagation, and the Dragonfly, which that one is a guess. I've looked at all the bits and pieces, and what I think it is, and I'm still kind of trying to understand, but I believe it's actually making reference to the Dragonfly galaxy, which is part of the Pegasus constellation. I think. Might still triggering that one out, but the main thing is why I'm drawn towards that one is it's the Dragonfly 44 galaxy is 99.9% dark matter. So all of these things are about the studies of dark matter. And you may remember a few years ago there was a big incident in Antarctica where they were using a miniature CERN, which was also going to be firing on April 5th and carrying out experiments of dark matter. And again, there's a description of being able to see a parallel universe, which again the stories from 2018 to 2020, parallel universe, and it wasn't, and it was, and it wasn't, and then the story just actually dropped out. Well, I had another little bit look around, and there's this spate that right near the new Mexican newsstands, which again is connected to these experiments happening right now. There was a solar observatory which was shut down with stories of swarms of police and black helicopters and everything, and but nobody really knew actually why. There was all stories to talk about reptilians and aliens and da-da-da. But in the end, it was actually because a janitor working at that place was apparently a pedophile. I've actually had a look at the court records, and it's really intriguing because there's actually only a couple of photos that are mentioned. None of them actually look particularly, there's a hint of pedophilia, but it doesn't actually give you really a lot of graphic details. And all that happens is that and I'm giving you the bullet points, is that the authorities were told to make up an excuse to shut down the observatory. In the court case, doesn't actually say what the excuse was. And again, we sort of get into this whole issue of this is the sort of thing that's the elephant that's missing from this whole. That was the explanation after the event. But what we also have is around the world is in the COVID period, about 2019-20, there were actually over 100 solar observatories actually shut down, and again cited because of COVID. But when you try to actually get any details about why they were shut and other ones weren't, you don't. Now, none of that proves anything, but what I do say is that we've got this raft of this sort of events where observatories are looking up because of the circumstances, and I'll get to that in a second. There's a talk about reference to a parallel universe, and it's apparently freaking out a lot of very powerful people in authority. Now, The parallel universe is a tricky one because it's not necessarily, I don't think it should be seen as a parallel universe per se, but what we're actually seeing as potentially is a little gap in a wormhole where we're actually getting to see into another universe or another, at least a galaxy dimension. And I think possibly that's what the CERN experiment on the April the 8th is about. It's basically about firing nuclei. That's the smallest sort of part of it goes sort of atomic electron quarks and nuclei. And I believe that what they're trying to do is actually fire that through so that they can actually get a snapshot of these other galaxies. There is a couple of interesting things because what it relates to is the perfect storm, and that yes, you've got an eclipse, but what makes this eclipse sort of doubly unique is that it coincides at the same time that it cross-references with the twin, or what's the comet known as twin-head comet. Now, two things about this comet is, number one is that the barrel shock that it's sending through it's going at incredible speed. So the barrel shock that it sends out basically has its own sort of electromagnetic field. And when it comes into contact with our own activity, and then you have this eclipse so that the radiation gamma rays are not there that sort of see things at a different spectrum, it sort of opens up, if you want, the portal so that you can see something that you wouldn't normally. So these conditions must come together for that ability to actually take place at the same place. The other thing about the devil twin comet is that it's, when they've examined it, it appears to have a swirling content inside of it. And when I've sort of looked a little bit about what could that be, what I've actually discovered is that there is a lot of talk about comets have sometimes caused mass extinction events, but because predominantly when that barrel shock combined with that dark matter comes in contact with our own universe, it can basically sort of cause effectively like a super bomb of energy, and that can have very, very devastating impact. It doesn't even necessarily actually have to hit the Earth for it to actually occur that. So that may be what's going on here about why this particular eclipse is a bit more interesting. And again, we sort of get a little hint of that at the Catalan Observatory, which again is examining not just the solar activity but the seismic activity. So what scientists at, say for example, Rocket Lab at QuakeTech, that's Auckland University Technology, studying is they're studying linear coupling effect, which is effectively how the electromagnetic field affects the seismic or the core of our own planet aspect of the situation, because again that relates to activity in the high ionosphere. So this is something that we physicists are only just starting to discover now. For ages, journalists, whenever this was suggested that somehow the events in the sky were affecting earthquakes, they go poo 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 as they rushed off and talked to geologists. Problem was they were talking to the wrong experts. They really needed to be talking to the astrophysicists, and further what they really needed to be doing was talking to the military scientists, because basically for example, the first red storm, which is these huge plasmic storms that occur in the upper atmosphere, wasn't actually even detected until 1995, when it's the first time civilian scientists were allowed upon a high-flying military aircraft with a high-speed camera, which allowed them to capture this. So that was sort of 1995 was the beginning when civilian scientists started studying what the military scientists had been studying since the war. And again, when you look at the declassified studies which involved Thomas Leach, who was the father of Project SEAL, the tsunami wave, you'll see that he was the sort of the top scientist that was actually sent to the big Allied meeting at the end of the war, when they blew off Oppenheimer blew up the first bomb and found that the sun was pulsating, and our scientists discovered this, and it was a big deal. I mean, it was the biggest out of all the documents I've ever witnessed. These documents were rated as an above top secret. And they went in there and they were really, at that stage, really, really keen to kind of understand more about this sort of occultation process, or the solar activity, how it affects the ionosphere, the electromagnetic field on our own planet, for signals, communications, jamming, and for next level sort of, if you want, electron weaponry. If Oppenheimer exploded the bomb and he was the age of atomicry, then basically what you're looking at was the development of the electron age. And I guess what you could say is we move into the, start manipulating with dark matter, we start to move into the age of the quantum age. So atomic bomb, electron bomb, quantum bomb. Boom, 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 is how I would kind of symbolize it. So this is stuff that basically, again, when you're looking at the declassified and what we know in New Zealand, is that basically from 1945 all the way up to 2020, New Zealand has been at the leading edge of basically ionospheric classified military research. And that's because we've got 3 solar activity laboratories that have been here since well even before the end of the 1900s. And even like the Cawthorn Institution, Nelson, the Cawthorn was trying to raise money, very much a Masonic man, very much into the sort of solar invisible university sort of alumni next level stuff. Science it's slightly esoterical, but it was science. But it was science that the Christian Church wasn't very happy with. So a lot of it was actually sort of kept on the QT, because the church used to get their knickers in a twist, and that's what originally started with King Charles, and it began with the Cromwell women. All these scientists, Protestants and Catholics, got together. They formed the secret university, or the invisible university, which people like Terry Pratchett have made into a lampoon ever since. And these were sort of the beginning of the Greek letter societies, which formed in America out of the Ivy League societies: Harvard, Yale, Skull and Bones, Oxford University. And they all, again, you sort of see around these old school universities, very distinct gargoyles, which even when I'm here today in Brisbane today, I've just been walking around the banking sector and looking up some of these buildings, and I'll put those up later on, about some of these sort of alchemy signs and around the banking areas. And you look at the streets, and the bars are named after, like, Alchemy Bar, and and you do actually, it's very interesting, for those who like to sort of go on about the Khazarian, is that I've also got some really good photos to you about some of the very strange buildings, past and present, that you'll find in Brisbane. But let's keep on track today about this occult activity. Well, not occult, occult solar activity. Although that is worth mentioning, because of course Whare up in Havelock North, Whare means the place of the rising sun, and the temple was actually again put on specific locations. And we do find that a lot of these sort of scientists involved in invisible universities that were tied up with the sort of the establishment did tend to put these places in specific places, which later on, as the places colonially develop, they will start to have certain names and laid out in certain ways. You've got Elizabeth Street and George Street, and they all, they do tend to have a very set pattern base. And even when you go to Canberra, the Canberra's laid out sacred geopathical patterns, and that's actually my great grandfather James Griffith, I think, was actually the architect behind that. But that's a video for another day, when we'll do that when we go to Canberra next time. So we'll just take I think I'll take a little bit of a break, and I'm just going to do this video, but I'll also share this with Fresh FM, the Deadline Report. We'll put this on there while I've been looking around. So while you're in the Fresh FM, the greatest radio station on the Deadline Report, do check out my website, The Dyslexic Detective, because we'll be putting up some websites there, and we'll be putting out some connections, links and so on as well. And again, if you want to turn around and actually donate a bit of research, because basically the next 4 months I'm going to be travelling, pretty much, will hopefully be travelling around the world, taking you through some of these incredible places, and maybe a little bit off the beaten path. But we'll see you soon. And this is Ben Vincent on the Deadline Report. Ben Goes Walkabout. Have a good day.